structure is clearly going to drive fear into the masses. We have to think about the entire life cycle of the carbon. Commitment to nationalism is ultimately going to get the entire planet killed. Propaganda coming from the alt-right that says, what I'm saying right now is, if you got on Parler, it would be heresy. The
current measures of economic growth are maybe not compatible with.
The ultimate point is, in the United States today, this current administration, and it probably will be with the next administration, Americans today have this view that we need to be better than everybody else. Americans view that this idea of superiority is driven by a commitment to nationalism, and a commitment to nationalism is ultimately going to get the entire planet killed. Because if you go back to my earlier assumptions based on Permian extinction event, 10 times the increase in carbon today than that event, then it's very clear to me, very clear to many scientists. Well, I'm not a scientist, but it's very clear to me that we're all going to die if we don't change our ways. I really, people have to accept the fact that our current path is doomed. And then once you accept that fact, then you start to explore ways out of that doom. What I'm telling you, one of the number one reasons that we're doomed is because of this commitment to nationalism. We have to really join forces with every country in the world. And then, of course, doing that, you really get to this point where you talked about earlier, the undeveloped world. We can't sit here and say, as wealthy nations, that those undeveloped worlds can't develop. We have to help them develop, and then it goes back to the energy source, right? The energy, we have to help. We all have to get together and look at our energy sources and recognizing energy is a way to get out of economic poverty, or poverty, I should say economic poverty, because that's a bad term. Really about, being clothed, housed, and sheltered and taken care of. You see propaganda coming from the alt-right that says, what I'm saying right now is, if you got on Parler, it would be heresy. They, have me, hung and tarred and feathered for saying this. But that's that fear that's being driven in to make people, that it's driving fear into it, saying the current power structure is clearly going to drive fear into the masses, so they don't have to give up power. We as the most economically advantaged country in the world, which is rapidly declining. We may not even be that today, but we being, those of us who really have to give up something in order to survive. We're either going to break through into this next level of growth, which is about learning how to collaborate and work with people who don't think or look like us, or we're all going to die.
So one of the things which you raised was that we need to move to this Internet of Things in terms of electricity grid. So how do you think about that when you think about, say, all this hacking that just happened? And on top of that, we know that in certain countries, they're using these systems to monitor activities of their own citizens, or sometimes citizens are being detained as they are talking to somebody. How do you pair that reality with joining everything together into this huge mass where this internet knows everything about everything, even in our homes?
This is again where you have to have faith that we can solve all of these problems. Otherwise, just give up and we'll all die, right? I'm telling you, this is all survival. So, the question you're asking is a really good one, because back in 2012, I was down in Washington in meetings at the Department of Energy. There were only a few utility folks invited to these meetings, and we were looking at cyber attacks. 40% of the cyber attacks coming into the country at that time were directed to the electric grid. So we had to build a system And we developed a model. It's called the C2M2 model. The electric sector cybersecurity maturity model is what we developed. We were one of 14 utilities nationwide who developed that model. And we built a very tight discipline around cybersecurity. And not saying that you can ever prevent yourself from being hacked, but you need to be the most diligent as possible. And if you look at cybersecurity, it's a very complex system, and there's protocols that need to be followed. And basically, it's somewhere around 2013 or 14, the federal government let its guard down on cybersecurity, kind of disbanded this whole cybersecurity force that was put in place for the electric grid. And people just threw up their hands. And it's just like anything else. I know personally, for example, I struggle with exercising every day and eating right and all that. As soon as I give up, I'm in trouble. It's hard work and we have to be diligent every day and every moment. But what's the alternative?
In terms of the science aspect, at least, what do you think needs to happen right now? Do you think we have the technologies that we need to address this, or what would you like to see happen right now?
Oh, we definitely have the technologies to solve this. What I would like to see right now is we move to this concept of, and by the way, my business was in Canada. I was working with Canadian government, and Canada's ready to sign up for this. But it's America that's not ready to sign up for this. I don't know what it's going to take for Americans to wake up. I think it's going to be even much more pain than we're going to see today. I just think ultimately we'll get there, but the greatest predictor of change is misery. So obviously we need more misery here. But so the point being, so here's what we need to do. We need to build a high voltage DC grid that's geographically circumferential with Canada and the United States. We need to move all of our hydro capacity to a backup capacity. We need to build as much wind and solar and storage in key locations. When I talk about storage, I'm talking electrical battery storage. And we need to aggressively commit to this Internet of Things. Now, this is not a new concept for those leaders in the utility industry, which weren't many, because we've been talking about this since 2010, this solution. And then, move our entire transportation sector to electricity, which I think it's happening anyway. You can see that automobile companies are committed to electrification. But that electrification and that smart grid have to happen hand in hand, because you can't have all your vehicles plugging in at a certain time because the grid will collapse. So ultimately, these are all going to have to happen together. But that is the answer. Build an HVDC grid, build as much wind and solar at right locations as possible, move your hydro to backup sources, put as much location storage as you can, electrical storage, and then manage the system as a physical system.
You raise very interesting points, and the way you combine them is quite helpful. So have you come across this new, it's kind of a few months old now, so this new documentary, which was, I think, produced by Michael Moore, or he was involved in some way. It's called The Planet of the Humans. And it addresses this point of how even when we are trying to develop these more, let's say, climate-friendly technologies, the backup power source is still fossil fuels. And
of course. First of all, that Michael Moore's documentary, I don't think he does us any justice, Michael Moore, because he's such a sensationalist. But there's definitely a lot of truth in that documentary. But what he does is he presents it in a way like I'm saying, we are all screwed. I agree with that. But I'm a kind of a perverse optimist, right? I think we will ultimately solve these problems. We can either do it now or later, but we're going to solve these problems, and the technology is there to do it. So when he talks about backup systems, of course we got to have backup systems, because it's a physical system. We have to have every millisecond. We have to have enough generation to equal the load. So duh, that's kind of like a duh point. What's your point, Michael Moore? The point is we've got to migrate away from that. And of course, when we think of migrating away from fossil fuels, we have to think about the entire life cycle of the carbon. For example, the state of Vermont asked me in the late 2000s to pursue wood as a fuel for electricity. I walked away from that because what I learned, we had a wonderful forester in the state of Vermont, his name Bob DeGuss, who taught me that anytime we take vegetative matter out of the forest, we ultimately degrade the soils of the forest. And electricity, maximum efficiency you're going to get from converting wood to electricity is 20%. Even with the gasification of the best systems in the world, you're not going to get greater than 20% efficiency. So I'm not going to build a system where we throw away 4 units of energy for every 1 energy unit we consume. That's totally irresponsible. So his points about renewables are well taken. That's why I keep talking about building renewable generation in the place it's most efficient. That's why I talk about changing our measures as a planet from gross domestic product growth to the efficiency of the carbon cycle. We could, if we start thinking in terms of efficiency and efficient use of our resources, then all of a sudden the world changes.
You talked about that you walked away from this plan to, ruin the forests. But did they still go ahead with the plan with somebody else in the seat?
No. That was kind of an energy groupthink that was occurring in the late 2000s. One of the most powerful things that really, not only did Bob DeGuss, our forester, slow me down, the Massachusetts commissioned a study called the Manomet study that showed the dangers of using wood for energy. And when I read that study, I said, okay, there's scientific verification of what my intuition was telling me.
Environmentalists make all these decisions because they are driven by their passion, but you actually looked at the data and it matched driving this environmentalism forward.
Yeah, so you said something very powerful there, right? I'm as human as everybody else. I get passionate. You hear me get very passionate about this great solution of building the HVDC grid, but as soon as we get data that says that's not the right direction, then of course we change direction. We have, and that's unfortunately as humans we struggle with our ego. Our ego gets centered around our own solutions, and that blinds us to the data. So we always have to be recognizing that we're not data-driven beings. We're emotionally driven beings, and there's the science behind the brain ties to that, right? You talk about your reptilian brain, that responds 5 times as fast as your thinking brain. So you kind of have to slow down and think, do these emotions make sense? And of course, I was really gung-ho about wood. I actually formed a company and partnered with built a gasifier. We spent $1.6 million. We built a gasifier that was built in Buffalo. And, this is the kind of the day I walked away from this. I actually got down to the path where I was working with a business partner to turn our sorted municipal waste into energy. And passionately committed to that. But I remember that the woman, I don't remember her young woman's name. She was probably 23 years old. She was pretty harsh, telling me in the legislature, I'm never going to support her. She was from Toxic Actions Network. And she said, what do you know about, the emissions caused by, the plastic, the burning of plastic? And I started to check into it. And I realized there's no way we can solve this problem using gasification. And again, walked away from that because you got to be thinking about your solution and the total impact it's going to have over time. Long-term systems thinking. That's my point is we are emotionally driven beings, and I'm as emotional as the rest of as the best of them, put it that way.